I've seen a lot of great college football players, Paul, and especially college quarterbacks. You think just back over this decade alone, the ones in the SEC that we've seen, from Cam Newton to Johnny Manziel, and just barely missing, we saw Tim Tebow. So we've seen some historic players, but Tua was different. And I've tried to articulate, and as a writer, I'm coming up woefully empty in doing so. The best way I can say it is, it was like watching art. He made it look so aesthetically pleasing in a way that I had never seen before. The spiral of the football, the accuracy of it, the sort of it wasn't as improvisational as a Johnny Manziel, but there was just sort of a flowingness to it that all came together that just looked like an artist at a canvas. And to see it taken away so cruelly with the blood on his shirt, and sort of hearing, reports of him screaming in pain, and realizing it was a hip, and how serious those are in terms of a career for a football player, to know that at least his collegiate career was over. There was such a sudden finality to it that there's no other way to put it other than just sadness. From my understanding, Nick Saban wasn't particularly keen on Tua playing this week, but Tua and his family, for whatever their own internal motivations were, maybe he wanted to play football, maybe he wanted to sort of show that he was durable to potential scouts. For whatever reason, they wanted to play, and he did play. And when they sort of tested him out before the game Saturday, and as you know, Paul, it was cold. It was an early morning kick, so they worked him out before the game, and they determined that if he wanted to play, he was healthy enough to play. And so, but could they have won that game without Tua? Surely they could have. I think it's also fair to point out, as my former esteemed colleague Cecil Hurt did, that Alabama scored 3 points with Mac Jones as a quarterback. And can you imagine the outrage if they had sat Tua and they sleptwalked their way through an 11 o'clock kick and they had gotten beat? But that's beside the point. They could have won that game without Tua, but they thought he was healthy enough to play. Tua and his family wanted to play, and he played. You can tell Nick Saban. I don't know if you got to hear his press conference today, Paul. He's very emotional over this, and he said he doesn't second guess himself, but I imagine in moments of reflection, which he admitted he's had over the last couple of days, it's only human nature to question yourself.
Welcome back. Glad you are all with us and taking your phone calls. A couple of guests to come. Tony Barnhart in the next hour. Danny Sheridan will join us about an hour and change from now. Always pretty exciting conversation with him as he gives us a preview of what some lines will look like next week with some of the big games, including the Iron Bowl, as well as the SEC championship game, as well as the odds of the playoff. Let's get back to the calls, and Scott is up next.
Hey, Paul. Just wanted to get your take on the Saturday game day. I was watching, and you mentioned manufactured excitement, manufactured something.
Right.
And Tim looked he looked angry, kind of upset. I mean, you could watch his body language. Was he upset at you?
Yeah, well,
Did he just
what happened
disagree
was
with
we
you,
had Marty Smith had done a report about Derek Brown, and I believe it was Humphrey. We're angry, and we're going to teach Georgia a lesson because they tried that fake field goal, and listen, I have no idea. I have no doubt they were upset about it. But Tim started going on and on about how he agreed with him, and I just said that's manufactured BS. I said something like that. Sometimes it does affect the way a team gets prepared, but I think Auburn had way too much else to think about than something that happened in the game last year.
Right.
But yeah, he was pretty upset.
I thought so, and I just wondered if he said anything during a break or.
I can tell you what I can tell you what he said during the break. He was laughing.
Good
because
deal.
Tim is the most competitive person I've ever met, and Tim would like if we battled every single segment about something because Tim likes to win. Tim doesn't matter what he does, he likes to win. I'm really not looking to win arguments on that show. I'm just looking to try to make the show a little better than or as good as it can be. So, I mean, we have different roles. But, you know, he's called me over before the show and say, hey, listen, we need to get after it. And and you know what? I'm not a genius, but I know one thing, that no matter what I say and no matter what the argument is, I will never win an argument in football on television with Tim Tebow.
That was evident Saturday.
I mean, no matter what Tim says, people are going to agree with because of the respect and reverence that he has. So I said, Tim, we can disagree, but I'm not going Stephen A. Smith on you here. I promise you.
Right. All right. Well, I just wanted your take on that.
Thank you
very much, and have a wonderful day.
Now, the same way with Stephen A. Smith. I'm with him every Tuesday on his radio show and every Wednesday on First Take. And I mean, I don't have a good voice any day of the week, let alone when I'm battling, you know, whatever I got. But Stephen A. Smith, I mean, he could out-talk anyone, anywhere. So I mean, I try to pick my battles. I mean, if I'm going to, you know, battle somebody on TV, it's going to be some old guy who played in the 20s. Calvin is in Raleigh. How are you, Calvin?
Fine, Paul. How you doing today?
We are doing great. Thank you.
Paul, you really look great. I mean that. I'm glad
to
see you looking healthy and well.
Well, man, I don't know when I've felt better.
Well, good. What I always says, it's better to look good than to feel good.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've got $7.50 worth of makeup on right now.
Oh, hallelujah. It looks good on you. Quick question. I did a little quick research, which is not foolproof, but since the Bowl Championship Series about 20 years ago started, I think only 10 or 11 teams have won it, and over half of those come from the Southeastern Conference.
Right.
With the trends going of schools wanting to get in, do you see evolving in college football teams outside the Southeast or the Southeastern Conference looking at a way to put their best teams together to give them better leverage at a national championship?
Well, I think that's what, let's say Oregon, and this is what's going to bother me a little bit if Oregon gets in. Oregon decided, let's play Auburn. And right now, let me ask the question to the group here. Auburn is what, the 5th best team in the SEC right now? You've got Alabama, you've got LSU, Georgia, Alabama, Florida, and Auburn. Yeah, Auburn would be considered the 5th best school by record in the SEC. So the best of the West met in the middle of the country to play Auburn and a freshman quarterback, and they couldn't win the game. I realize the game was on August 31st. I don't think it would be any different today. I think Auburn would beat Oregon today. We'll be right back. I'd like to know if there's anything you don't do well. I mean, you're a really great baseball player. You're a great quarterback. You're a musician. Tell us about your musical skills.
I've been playing piano since I was in the 2nd grade.
What a great interview. Too bad the guy plays for Ole Miss.
Lee is up next. Hey, Lee, go right ahead.
Hey, Paul.
I tell you what, Lee, hold the thought. I apologize. I don't want to crowd you. Don't go anywhere.
But I just decided I would call you today and see if I could get through. And that I saw that young man from North Mississippi.
Texas A&M is one of the 25 best teams in the country, but they won't be ranked if they were to lose those last two.
Yeah, I mean, they have played literally everyone.
And here's something else I'm going to tell you. I don't think Alabama's going to make the playoff. I think Oregon's going to go jump them. But this is what's going to happen. You heard it here. Oregon goes in Arizona State and gets knocked off.
He's a Georgia grad.
There we go. Don't make me start barking in here, Paul.
Are you finally at least drinking a little Mullinae? Would you like to hear my Coach O imitation?
I would. Thank you.
Go Tigers, Paul. You got a great show. You're the #1 SEC leader, Paul. Keep it up.
You know, in the last 48 hours, he has said that Ray Tanner did talk to FSU and that Ray Tanner did not talk to FSU. I've put in 2 requests to talk to Bob Caslen, and he won't talk to me. He's talking to everybody else in the state.
Clemson leads in the series 70, 42, and 4, including a 51-32 street advantage in Columbia. That is unacceptable.
And frankly, it's more fun to watch the end of a game on Twitter than it is from one of the networks.
Can you say that one more time, Paul? I don't think I heard you.
Here's the way to get on this show. Say that the host of the show is the best you've ever seen. We'll put you right on the board. We promise you, if you say only good things about the host, we will share your tweets with the audience.
All right.
Welcome back. We're so glad you are here. And Danny Sheridan, an hour away. Tony Barnhart coming up here shortly. It's been too long since we had a chance to talk to Tony B. Let's talk to I-Man next.
Good afternoon, Paul.
Hi there.
You know, I agree with everything that you've kind of said. I'm going to back up just a little bit, and I'm going to show you how much your opinion and your tone mostly changed. A couple weeks ago, you said that A&M should not have gotten beaten by Auburn last year, and you seemed pretty defined in that you felt like that shouldn't have happened. This year, you said that something similar, that A&M shouldn't have lost the Auburn game. That was a winnable game. And then the other day, you said that A&M really had no chance against Auburn's defense, and you sounded like Auburn should have won that game. And I agree with all those things you said. But, you know, and you were talking about Oregon. I agree with you totally there. But this is where the committee changed things. They said that the South Carolina beatdown of Georgia went away. It just didn't happen. 2 wins just totally washed that away. Do you agree with that thinking?
Yeah, I do. I-Man.
All right. So if you agree with that, then it looks like that maybe the Auburn loss that Oregon had is not really that bad a loss, and their worth has kind of washed it away.
No, listen, it is not a bad loss. In fact, it's a really good loss, but it's still a loss. And
right.
I mean, it all depends on who we're comparing Oregon to. If we are comparing Oregon to Alabama in 2 weeks, and Alabama has a win over Auburn, it becomes a different conversation. If Alabama doesn't have a win over Auburn, it's a moot point.
And you know, I kind of agree with you on that. But let me ask you about Alabama-Clemson. Both have played weak schedules. Wouldn't you say they are basically the same team doing the same thing, other than Alabama lost to LSU?
The difference between Alabama and Clemson is that Alabama has played a much better schedule than Clemson, will have played a much better schedule than Clemson at the end of the year. Okay, the Texas A&M game, which is Alabama's best win right now, is negated because Clemson played them as well. But
right.
but Alabama, played LSU and lost. Clemson didn't have another game like that. To me, the tiebreaker will be Auburn.
Yeah, because Auburn is a ranked team.
Yeah, and I get the media is really dishonest and lazy sometimes when they just say, well, hey, so and so has 3 top 25 wins. Like, why do I care? I mean, I know what Alabama goes through every week. I know what Auburn goes through. Texas A&M right now isn't ranked, but I was out at Auburn, Texas A&M. That's still a tough win. And
they're giving Clemson win. They're giving Clemson a whole lot of credit for that A&M win.
Yeah, I mean,
and
Clemson got all.
Alabama should get a step above.
Right.
They went on the road and did it worse.
Right.
If strength of record is a deal.
Clemson has not done one thing this year that's impressive. But by the way, they're doing all they can do. I mean, they're playing. They had a close call. They've gotten better. I think they're really a good team now. But they're playing a bunch of really bad tems.
When we listen to the committee and their definitions of certain teams and questions that are asked, that's when everything gets crazy.
Yeah.
Because they're not. It's not the same conversation and the same approach. And if you're using the same theory or what am I trying to say? If you're using the same math that made this team good, you use the same math over here, and you can't. They're not.
I mean, if Auburn played Oregon's schedule, they'd be ranked in the top 4. They would be ranked number 3 in the country right now.
I think there's probably 10 teams right now. If they played some of these schedules, they would all be undefeated or 1 loss.
Absolutely, and that's where it gets a little bit frustrating. But listen, with Alabama, they've had a lot of breaks over the years, so this may be one year where they don't have a break.
Yeah, and yesterday you was talking about Ohio State's kind of backloaded, and they're, it's this way every year. The SEC owns the polls for about the first 3 quarters of the year because there's so many ranked teams and they're doing a lot of things, and then they start playing each other. And there's really not that much of a ranking system in the Big Ten, and some of their big games are late, so they tend to move in the polls where the SEC kind of gets stuck sitting where they are. But anyway, Paul, great day.
Thank you. Nice of you to call. Lee makes our second call from Seattle in an hour and 6 minutes.
Well, I missed the first one. I'm not sure where I was.
And you know what? I'm pretty sleepless right now in Seattle.
You do look great, but that honking hairball you're trying to get out is it's frightening to listen to.
Yeah, no, it's. I'm just going to go ahead and hit myself over the head with a hammer.
Yeah. Okay. Just for a minute, though. A couple of questions. First, I don't know if I've mentioned it before, but most of my growing up, my mom was a lyricist.
Really?
Songwriter. Yeah, I heard you talking about it yesterday. For over 20 years, she wrote for Motown and
That is really cool.
And I've spent quite a bit of time in the studios growing up, and when Motown was Motown, and it was a phenomenal
Motown
experience.
Was the center of the music universe.
Right. It was
good friend Barry Gordy.
in L.A. It wasn't in Detroit, although she had to go back to Detroit several times. But it was in L.A. So I mean, I could tell you stories, but certainly won't get on the air. One of the questions, out of curiosity, on an average, how many of those notes do you get from your bosses a week?
I shouldn't say this on the air, but my bosses like to, a lot of times it's not me. I could go in the other room and ask Mark and Brams how often they get hit up by the bosses. See, I'm not here for about 3. I'm only here 2 days a week. So
you never have one waiting for you when you get back in town about.
No, they tend to. Most mid-level management tends to shoot low.
Oh. Okay.
So when I get a call, I had one about 2 weeks ago from like my really big boss. That's when you get nervous.
I would, in any business, that's when you get nervous.
And especially when they call you and they say, "Why were you in a strip club at 3 a.m. in the morning?"
Oh yeah, I've never gotten that call.
Yeah,
I'll never have to worry about.
And I said I was not there. They said we have pictures of you and Barkley in the strip club.
Oh goodness.
You seen what Barkley said?
I just hope that's really not true, but if it is, so be it.
Now, Lee, do I look like somebody that hangs out in a strip club at 3 a.m.?
No, that's why I'm.
More like 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Right, I get it. That's why I wasn't, starting to recite biblical.
Randy and I were at one this afternoon.
Of course you were.
Yeah.
Yeah, called Hooters, right?
Yeah, two for one Thursday.
Right. I have a question. I have 2 questions. One about the playoff system, but also yesterday you mentioned that Tua's family had expressed that they wanted him to play and everything. Have they spoke since then?
No. The Tua family, Lee, issued a statement thanking everyone, and that is the only comment they have made so far.
So they haven't come out and said we want him to play. We don't blame the coach or anything like that.
No, and I don't think we will see that late. I don't think we're going to see that at all. Hey, thanks for the call. I do appreciate it. Cooter, I wish my name was Cooter.
Hey, Paul, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
I have a quick question. First of all, I got to say thank you so much to you and your show. I came from Big Ten country, and I transferred down here to the South. And the SEC Network and your show, I love the people who call up. I love the excitement that the different stadiums have. It's fantastic.
Cooter, you know what always surprises me? I'm catching an early flight this morning at LaGuardia, and I ran into a guy with a Ohio State sweatshirt, and I'm like going, here we go. And I was somewhat cautious as we were talking until he told me he was a pastor in Lexington, Kentucky.
Wow.
And I am amazed how many Big Ten fans watch and listen to this show. I assume they had a show like this on the Big Ten Network, but I'm told they don't.
We
should do a separate feed for Big Ten.
They probably, if you can get out of the, as long as you can keep the Michigan people on the outside, their egos will.
No, if I worked at the Big Ten Network, I would have a steadfast rule: no Michigan fans allowed.
Oh, I just have my own bias against Michigan. I dated a Michigan girl, and when I was in college, she broke my heart. I hate Michigan.
So it's all over this young lady.
Oh, just brutal, just brutal. I hate the University of Michigan. She teaches now at Michigan State, so I just have even more reason to hate that state of Michigan. But aside from that, when Ohio State plays this weekend, they're playing Penn State.
Yeah,
as you know. And I think what are they favored by? Something like 14 points, 17
it's more
points?
than that. It's like 16, 18.
Okay, I threw in the 17 at the end. What if Penn State plays a decent game and they, when Ohio State only wins by something like a touchdown? Is that considered a bad win?
No,
for them?
I don't see how that could be. To me, it doesn't matter what you're supposed to win by. To me, if you're Ohio State and you beat Penn State, that's pretty significant. That's a good win on any day of the week. Hey, thanks for the call. Appreciate it. We are heading to a break. Tony Barnhart, Mr. College Football. He'll join us shortly. Playing with Style brought to you by Belk. Who's playing with style? How about the Aggies? They are doing quite well, thank you, in the last 4 games. If they can continue that over the next 2 games, we got something to talk about here. How about these notes? First time A&M and Georgia have met since A&M joined the league. A&M has lost 6 straight against top 5 teams. FPI and the FBI, both like Georgia. So, guys, is this a sneaky good game, or is it the fact that there aren't any other good games in the SEC?
Both. Well, I want this to be a good game just because I want to see Texas A&M say they've taken that next step to play. They have LSU next week, too, so I want this to be a good game so that we can have a good game next week. But sure. LSU playing Clemson and Alabama already, and Auburn, those are their 3 losses. Everybody's wondering what their good win is, and it's probably Mississippi State. So I want to see what they can do and go in and just kind of be this. Are they ready to take the next step next year? Are they going to build off the momentum and take it on next year? So that's my hope. But on the other hand, if you're Georgia, if you have a tight game, what's the committee going to look like at that? It's at home, probably going to be very rainy. Are they going to look at it and say, hey, you're close against an A&M team whose best win is against Mississippi State. Are you really worthy of a 4th spot? Would they move down? I don't know. It's like you get this playoff committee conundrum that comes with it.
Yeah, listen, I think A&M is going to play a big role in shaping the SEC championship game, considering they play the 2 teams that will be competing.
Right. We'll get to measure those 2 teams against their performance against A&M over the next 2 weeks.
Jimbo Fisher will be a busy man during the championship week.
Yeah. Well, what happens if A&M wins this game and then Georgia beats LSU in the SEC title game?
I think Georgia would be in trouble. That would be 2 home losses.
Yeah.
And to me, if it's a narrow game, I would still take LSU over them.
What about Bama? You probably put Bama in too, right?
Pretty amazing.
Yeah, I don't know about the Bama. I think LSU would be ranked ahead of Bama. So I forgot Bill Hancock said we don't look at conferences.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, I don't know what we look at. Tony Barnhart is with us, Mr. College Football. He joins us, and Tony's always great to have you back on the show. We were just trying to figure out how A&M got the schedule that they did. Does somebody not like Jimbo Fisher?
I tell you what, when I saw that schedule, and then when they put that schedule out, I said, who in the world finishes with a tougher last 2 games than at Georgia and at LSU? And, oh, by the way, they're both ranked in the top 4. Jimbo's got to be saying, man, who did I make mad? Wow.
I think somebody said, you know what, Jimbo, you may be making $75 million, but
but you're going to pay for it.
We schedule, and we don't make that much money here.
Oh, man.
Well, let's talk about this game because it's really, to me, I don't remember a game quite like this where, forget LSU. I mean, there's a lot going on in that game, and we all know why. But for Georgia, they just got through beating Florida in Auburn, and they have Georgia Tech, which is not really saying much this year. But this ought to be the breather weekend.
And for a lot of people, it is.
Yeah.
But not for Georgia. Not for Georgia. I spoke to a group of Georgia grads at Terry College of Business this summer, and somebody asked me, what's the scariest game on Georgia's schedule? Now, this is in June. I said it's Texas A&M because it falls right after Auburn, and you know that Auburn is going to be even if you win, you're going to get beat up. And now, not only did Georgia win against Auburn, they clinched a spot in the SEC championship game, won the East again, and now they've got to get back up to play a team that's playing their best football of the season. It will be fascinating to see the beginning of that game and what the energy level is for Georgia.
And as you look at Georgia right now, I mean, the offense has really trailed off. Now let's be honest. In the last 4 games, they played 2 of the better defenses in America.
Right.
That may be more of the reason than anything. And one game was a downpour. So I mean, you keep seeing those stats thrown around, but are they really accurate in terms of a true read?
Well, I wouldn't wade too much into it. Now, there's no question that Georgia, because of their youth at wide receiver, and if they don't have the other kid in there, the transfer from Miami, if they don't have him and Lawrence Cager, if they don't have him in there, they're a different kind of offense because the other receivers are talented but very, very young. I mean, they've been able to win that way because they've got a very good offensive line, and DeAndre Swift's a great running back, and Jake Fromm is a wonderful manager of the game. And I mean that is a very, very high compliment. But the fact of the matter is, I didn't expect them to score more than 21 or 24 points last week. I think they'll do better against Texas A&M, but that's just who Georgia is, Paul. They're not gonna average 35, 40 points a game. They're gonna beat you running the ball and beat you with that defense, which is one of the better ones we've seen at Georgia in a while.
Tony, what happens, and somebody just asked me this, Mark Kubiak, what happens if Georgia loses this game and then beats LSU, and that's assuming LSU shows up undefeated?
It'll be a sleepless night for the fans who follow Georgia because if they beat LSU and LSU's 12-1, I think LSU's getting in.
Yeah.
Because look at that body of work that LSU has, and Georgia sitting there, they would be 11-2, and they would be SEC champions. Are you guaranteed to get in at 11-2? Well, they've never put a 2-loss team in before. Would Georgia be deserving? Yes, because they're the SEC champions. But as the way this thing is set up, there's a bunch of teams. There's a bunch of 1-loss teams right now who feel like they deserve in. I just think it would be a very sleepless night for the Georgia Bulldogs.
Let me ask you about Alabama, and certainly that has been the debate. And we're making some assumptions here, but just for the sake of argument, Alabama gets out of Jordan Hare alive. And to me, getting out of there with a win, I don't care what the score is. That's a significant accomplishment.
Huge one. Absolutely. And we know what the argument is going to be right now. We know what it's going to – if Oregon – and it all hangs on Oregon. It really does. A 12-1 Oregon who would have won 12 straight games since losing in the final seconds to Auburn will have beaten, I think, a really, really good Utah team at 12-1. So they're sitting there and they're going to say, hey, we won 12 games in a row. We lost to Auburn on the next to the last play of the game, but we deserve to be in. And Alabama would say, well, wait a minute. We beat Auburn, the team that beat you, and we went in there on the road with our backup quarterback and beat them. We deserve to go. And it will be a heck of an argument.
What would you do if you were on the committee?
If Alabama takes care of Auburn and they're sitting there, and I think the Tua discussion does come into play only at that point, but I would put Alabama in because I think look at how they've dominated the opponents all year, and yes, their schedule is simply not as good as it's been in the past, and their defense is not as good as it's been in the past. But I think in the body of work, Alabama will have earned the right to be there. And others will disagree.
And they're welcome to it, but they will be wrong.
Well, it's going to be an interesting argument, particularly if the Pac-12 and if the Pac-12 and the Big 12 get left out, which is entirely possible.
Tony, let me ask you about what's going on in Columbia, South Carolina, because
wow,
I don't remember anything quite like this. I mean, you got veteran ADs and a president who, listen, I mean, I'm impressed with him because he was the commander at West Point. He's a 3-star general. I mean, this guy's been through a lot more than I'll ever go through in my life, but it's still been just perplexing to watch. Take a swing at what in the world is going on there.
Well, when the president, and I haven't had a chance to meet the president, but obviously I know his reputation, but when the president says in one day that Ray Tanner talked to Florida State about how to manage a buyout, and then the very next day he says, well, no, he really didn't. You know, I know Ray Tanner pretty well. I think he's an honorable man. So I don't know what's going on there, but that's why sometimes it gets a little scary when presidents talk about athletics, because it just gets a little confusing. But yeah, how do you feel if you're Ray Tanner, and how do you feel if you're Will Muschamp? You got to be thinking, what in the world is going on here? So it's puzzling.
You're probably thinking, you know what? If you got $18 million, I'll take it right now.
It's just totally bizarre. There was obviously a miscommunication up the chain of command.
I mean, listen, I'm not trying to bring politics into this, but I mean, it's the kind of thing you see at a Washington hearing where somebody says, "Oh yeah, I realize I forgot to add something to my testimony." Yeah.
What the president really meant to say was, and
I was very confused when the president was talking to me, and I completely forgot the most important thing. But again, I admire the president because he's doing a bunch of interviews, but he needs to stop.
Well, yeah, and his chief of staff, to take on the military metaphor a little further, the chief of staff needs to say, Mr. President, let's you and I talk about whatever you're going to say if it pertains to athletics.
You know, one thing the president's figured out, though, Tony, he can talk about all these other things that are important to a university, and nobody is going to care. But if he talks about football, we all pay attention.
They care. Well, it's like we were talking about when California passed their pay-for-play bill for athletes and all that. And then all of a sudden, all these other states were jumping in, and then the federal government was going to check in. I told somebody, I said, here, the reality is politicians know my constituents aren't going to read the farm bill, but they're going to read this. So let's jump on board.
Well said and well done. Tony, we will reconvene. We've got a lot to talk about after this weekend, and we're heading to Athens tomorrow. Tell the rain to stay away.
Oh, man, that weather report does not look good.
No. But we know one thing, Georgia's got some rain experience this year.
That game against Kentucky, if it rains any harder than the Kentucky game, then we better get out of our boats, because that was something.
Always good to have you on, Tony. Hope to see you soon.
All right, thanks, Paul.
The one and only Tony Barnhart, one of my favorite people in the world, joining us from Georgia. Danny Sheridan's 30 minutes away. Why has the security force just walked in here? More of your.
I know a lot of people are throwing that Wisconsin win out the window, but when you look at how good Wisconsin was playing going into that game and the weather circumstances, that was a really big win. And one thing that a couple staff members told me was, look at how Justin Fields played in the second half of that game. That was a game where they were going to be forced to have him run the ball, and they didn't want to do that. And he was able to throw in windy, rainy, cold weather environment, and he did well. They boat raced Wisconsin in the second half, and that's when I think a lot of people around the country started to think that Ohio State was the most complete team in the country. But it all changes this weekend. I mean, Penn State is arguably the best team they will face to this point. They have Michigan next week. But the thing about this Penn State game is this could be the first time that this team faces real adversity. They haven't had to play in the fourth quarter to win yet. And, Ryan Day brought that up at his press conference yesterday and said, yeah, we're going to have to put this game on Justin Fields' back. And he hasn't had to do that since his junior year of high school. His teams have been so good, and obviously he was hurt during his senior year of high school. So when he was asked about that, he said, oh yeah, I'm always ready for that. But it's easier to say that you are compared to playing it. So we'll see what happens Saturday, but these guys are locked and loaded. They are very cliche with everything, 1-0 mentality. They're not worried about Michigan right now, but they know what's in front of them. I think Ohio State is the most complete team in the country. I think that LSU right now has the most exciting offense because we haven't seen it at LSU. And that's not to take anything away from him. Joe Burrow is playing lights out. I mean, he's number one on everybody's Heisman list. He should be. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is running the ball out of his mind. And people didn't even think that he was going to be the starter this season for them. The offensive line, which was the biggest question mark coming into the season, is playing better than people on that staff expected. So I think if we had seen this from LSU before, we wouldn't be as giddy about it. But because they made such an overnight transformation, people are more excited about it. And that's why I think that you're hearing so much blowback about, well, how come LSU is a number one? Look at their resume. Yes, they have a great resume, but that defense has a lot of issues. And when you play Ole Miss, and I understand emotions, it's a rivalry game. I grew up in Oxford. I understand what that game means to Ole Miss players and Ole Miss fans. But you can't let a team that bad run on you all night long. And I think that that's something that other teams are looking at when they potentially face LSU this season.
SEC Nation live from Athens, University of Georgia. Hope you'll check it out. Welcome back. And checking the latest lines for tonight's races. Anyway, let's get back to the calls at 855-242. I mean, when the camera catches you with your phone, you got to come up with an excuse, don't you? Yeah. I don't want these. I'm texting Danny Sheridan for some early lines for this weekend's games, although I probably was. Howard is up next. Howard, you're on the air. Go right ahead.
Hey, thanks, Paul.
Hey there.
How are you doing?
I
Hope
am.
You're having a good day.
Thank you. I'm doing great.
I just want to ask a simple question. It seems like every year it's Clemson is there. Nobody wants to talk about Clemson. They have a weak schedule, and I just want to know what your opinion is. Somebody has got to beat Clemson. Thank you.
Yeah, well, listen, if Clemson didn't do anything in the postseason, we'd have a better argument. But let's see, they've beaten Ohio State, Notre Dame, Alabama, so even that weak schedule doesn't seem to be holding them back too much. Thanks for the call. We will talk to Jim next. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Paul. I hope you get feeling better, my man.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I was watching ESPN's Get Up this morning, and they were debating whether or not Tua should come back for his senior year.
Right.
Which I think is ridiculous to even consider, or for him to consider, but and they were comparing like Drew Lock and his $7 million contract to Kyler Murray and his $50 million contract, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I saw the clip of that. I think it's patently absurd for him to come back, unless his health is so harmful to him that he can't play for the time being, and maybe he could just come back and rehab and decide later whether he wants to play or not. He doesn't need Alabama, and I think he would be wasting time. And those who argue, well, it's too bad he can't win the Heisman. Maybe he'll win a national championship. He's already won the national championship. He's already come in second in the Heisman. And he's got to start thinking about the rest of his life. And, he couldn't leave last year, but had he been able to leave last year, he probably would have been the first player taken. And,
right.
and somebody else brought this up to me the other day. What if the name and likeness had been enacted a couple of years ago? Can you imagine the money Tua would have made? So I just think it's time for him to go on. I mean, even right now, I think he's still looking very strong as a first-round pick. And he still will make a lot of money. He won't make as much as the first pick, but the big contracts in the NFL are not the first or not the first go-around. It's the second contract. That's when you make the killing, so to speak.
Right. Yeah. I think that Dallas quarterback is making less than $1 million.
Yeah. Listen,
right
I mean,
now.
I'm not faulting anyone for sitting on Get Up and saying something outrageous so it gets picked up. I've done it a few times this week on that show. Thank you for the call. Jeff is up next in Tennessee. Hello, Jeff.
Hello, Mr. Finebaum. Thanks for taking my call.
Thank you.
I'd like your thoughts on Tennessee at Missouri coming up this weekend. That is, there a lot of people that say, well, just another low-end game. But to us in East Tennessee, we're big Tennessee fans, and I'd like your opinion on that, please.
I can't trust Missouri. I'm going with Tennessee. I think Tennessee is coming along at the right time, and to me, they've shown that they are a really good football team right now under the circumstances. Under the circumstances, meaning where they were 7 or 8 weeks ago. Missouri, to me, has been a dumpster fire. I mean, I don't know what's wrong with that program. And if I'm a Missouri football fan, I've got serious concerns about the future.
Well, I just hope that Tennessee holds on to Jeremy Pruitt, because I think he has our team pointed in the right direction.
He does.
And I know Mr. Palmer is a great AD.
I agree with you on
it'll
that.
Be all good.
I think Phillips one of the best ADs in the country in terms of his personal imprint on the program and what he's meant, and I couldn't be happier. Thank you very, very much. Let's check out JC in Indianapolis, where they don't make little, you know that song. Go ahead.
Hello. I'm in Indianapolis, but my question is about Arkansas. I'm an Arkansas fan from Arkansas. There's so many names, especially within the state and the community.
JC, what kind of names are you hearing?
I'm sorry, lost you there. There's Lane Kiffin, and then these are names that not everybody's talking about, but Bobby Petrino. We have petitions for Bobby Petrino and petitions for.
Hey, let me ask you a question. What would be the reaction of the fans, the overall fan base, not just the extreme, if Bobby Petrino came back to coach?
I think it's torn. I think it's about 50-50.
Okay.
I really do.
Well, let's break this down for a second. Bobby Petrino was a great coach at Arkansas. He got fired for a couple of reasons. Number one, it wasn't that he was having a relationship with a subordinate. It wasn't because he had a motorcycle accident, although I still can't get the image of that neck brace around his neck. But he got fired because he lied to his supervisors. I think had he told the truth, which is sometimes hard to do, hey, I'm sorry, I'm having a relationship with a subordinate, even though that's against school policy, and I believe it's against state law. So he lied, and he got fired, and he was able to salvage his career until it crashed and burned again. But the point is, the one thing about Bobby Petrino that you know, if you hire him as your football coach, you know what you're getting. You're getting a liar. You're getting somebody who has left programs in the dust, and you have to decide whether you really care when you juxtapose that versus the fact that he's a really good football coach. So what do you want?
I'm on the don't bring Bobby back side of the 50-50. But my main question to you is, if all the coaches are out there, who would you consider a coach that could actually come into Arkansas and build the program? You're not going to build the program to be no Alabama or no LSU.
No, but you don't have to. Listen, I mean, I would say, let's talk about Lane Kiffin for a second. I mean, Lane's a very good coach. I have no problem with him. I happen to be a fan of Hugh Freeze. I'm well aware of what got him fired at Ole Miss. I think Norvell is a good coach. He's done a phenomenal job in Memphis. Those are three coaches I know you can get. I don't know if you can get Matt Campbell. What other names are being mentioned?
There's a lot of Houston Nutt talk.
Well, to me, Houston Nutt, while he was not fired for anything other than an inability to win football games, but don't hold that against him, okay?
Well, I've seen where he said he would be willing to come back to Arkansas in another capacity, even as just a recruit. And I'm just wondering.
Yeah, listen, I think Houston was a very good football coach, but I think his time as a head coach has passed. So I'm not a big believer in just going out and digging up the graveyard for former coaches. I think Arkansas needs something that you can trust. Now, the one thing, don't get caught up in going out and finding the next hot new it. That's what Chad Morris was. Didn't work out. Brett Bielema was experienced. Didn't work out. You need somebody that can adapt, that can adjust, that can win in the Southeastern Conference. Thanks for the call. Appreciate it. We'll be right back.